I see a lot of ads online from accountants or CPAs about writing off G-Wagons, writing off like Lamborghinis. And now, one of my favorite rappers, Lil Dicky, rented a Lamborghini. Well, I guess he didn't rent it. He borrowed a Lamborghini for free, although that would have been a tax write-off and blah, blah, blah for his music video. That's not what we're talking about. I see ads all the time, just like on Facebook, on YouTube, whatever. Like, oh, in 30 seconds, you can write off $50 million from this G-Wagon. Like, there's no way. Like, what am I either missing and not understanding, or what is being left out? It's got to be one or the other.
There's a lot being left out. Number one, as we say, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. There's a lot of things that we're leaving out, but I want to go over why that's not a good strategy, and kind of gets into like, what is a tax deduction? A tax deduction is basically, think of it as like a discount. For every business dollar that you save, you get to save your tax rate. So if you are in the 20%.
Every dollar you save or spend?
Spend.
Okay.
Every dollar you spend on business expenses, you get to save a percentage on your taxes. So for instance, if you're in the 20% tax bracket and you spend $1, you just lowered your taxes by 20 cents. Now, what do I mean by that? G-Wagons, what are they? Got to be over 100,000, right?
I have a lot of money. Money I don't have yet.
Yeah, money I don't have. May never have.
Yet.
So, while yes, that is true, you can go out and buy a G-Wagon and wipe out your tax liability. You may not need that car. You may not want that car. And now you have a payment that's due that you don't even want. And you're like, yeah, it's great. I don't have any taxes. I don't have any money now. And now I have this car that's now I don't know if G-Wagons break down, but now I have this car that like I don't need or don't want. And there's just so much wrong with that, is that you're spending $100,000 to maybe wipe out $20,000 in taxes, which just like doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm happy to deduct it for you, that's great, but to me, you don't ever want to do something for taxes. You want to do something in your business that you need. Oh, and it just happens to benefit you tax-wise. We just help you point out what is good. For instance, like hiring your kids. That's a whole other one that we can get into another time.
Yeah.
But a few other things that happen when you write off your car that way. What people don't tell you is that if you then were to turn around and sell that G-Wagon, trade it in, you have to pay a tax on that now. So for instance, let's say you bought the car for $100, you write it off this year because you heard somebody on TikTok who's not an accountant giving tax advice, and you're like, man, this car fucking sucks, I can't stand it, I'm gonna sell it, and then you sell it for $50,000. Well, guess what? You have to pay tax on that $50,000, and you're probably in the hole and you're covering debts. Like, well, shit, now I gotta do this. Or in order to not pay that tax, you have to buy a big or more expensive car, and you're like, well, now I'm just having to keep buying more and more expensive cars that don't make me any money just to avoid paying taxes. And now you're like, now you're spending money to not spend money. It's just it's a whole predicament. And every time somebody tells me that, I cringe. And I'm like, there's so many better ways to not pay taxes than to go buy a luxury car you don't need.
I would like to insert a caveat. You tell me what you think. I think also a lot of time, the reason that you cringe, like you said, is because most of the people doing it are not accountants. They're not tax people. They're not like super savvy business people with a background in bookkeeping or something.
Yeah.
So then like when they dive into it, like they don't even know where they're at. So then they don't do it right.
And not only that is that strategy might work for somebody who's really rich. So for example, there's a famous podcast that we watch in Miami. I'm not going to say who it is because we don't want to get canceled. But they had their accountant on, and they buy really nice cars because they need to like transport guests from the airport. Like, that makes sense for them because, one, they're making millions upon millions of dollars every year.
And that podcast in general, like they generally deal with
yeah,
higher net worth people, at least as guests.
Right,
yeah.
So that makes sense. But if you're making $50,000 a year, like hustling, doing like an eBay shop, and you're like, you know what I'm going to go buy? A Tesla because I heard somebody else say it, and they're like, oh, they're ultra rich. It's like, well, wait a minute, hang on a second. There's so many reasons why it works for them, but why it doesn't work for you, which is why it's important to have a tax preparer, a tax strategist, because then it'd be nice, right, if you could just text me every day and be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? Oh, here's the pros and cons. I don't think this is good for you.
I think you would do that. How much money? You'd give your phone number out to somebody to text you every day. Can I deduct this? How much?
Well,
lots of zeros, right?
There might be a comma or two in there. But,
I was thinking 3.
Yeah, there might be. Yeah, I love all my clients. Like, I'm very selective of who I give my number out to. But yeah, like we have clients that like they'll text me or call me or Slack, whatever, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think?" Which is what you want, because what I would hate to have happen, and this happens before, like you've seen it, Drew, is where people do stuff without calling me, and then after that they're like, "Hey, I did this. What do you think?" Man, I wish you had told me, because I would have told you not to do that. But like, I can't check in with you every day. I can't. But and again, I will never tell my client not to do something, not to do, or not to buy something specific. But I will give you the pros and the cons, and then if you ask me, I'll give you my opinion. But the point is that you want to be working with a strategist. You can't be making these big decisions that could end up costing you down the road because you heard somebody on TikTok do it. Because we have a client, he's an influencer. He went out and bought like a $150,000 Tesla, but it makes sense for him and his brand because, one, he can afford it, and two, it's in that line of business. So, for example, if you work at home, right, and you have an e-commerce store, you're not really traveling for work, like for the most part. It's all at home. You can't even write that off because you don't use it in business. This client we have, who's an influencer, he has his car in videos. He made a video about buying it. He drives it for work. He shoots content. That's a business car. That makes sense. For you, who has an e-commerce store, that doesn't make sense. And you probably didn't ask that influencer, the guy on TikTok, why he did it. You're just seeing the end result, which is like that's like anything. Would you agree?
Oh yeah. I mean, we tell people all the time, specifically, never spend for taxes.
Yep.
Spend because you need to spend, and then just take advantage of the taxes.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think people go down some bad rabbit holes, unfortunately.
Like we said, there are reasons to buy a Porsche.
Oh yeah.
There's tons of them. They just may not fit your specific goals and your needs. And you kind of want to think of I think most people inherently know what's deductible and what's not. There might be some minutia, but like most clients, I mean, even you heard, like when you explain to like, yeah, that makes sense. Like nobody's ever like heard us explain something and be like, oh yeah, that's not right. That doesn't make any sense.
You idiots.
Yeah, most people don't. And if they think that about me, we get rid of them.
Yeah, honestly, because we're not a good match from it at that point. Honestly,
we don't want to battle somebody.
Yeah,
we want somebody who's going to take the advice. Like I would never go to my doctor if he recommended surgery. I'd be like, no, that ain't it.
No, wrap me up, just stitch me up, bro. I don't need surgery.
You can't. Your UCL is torn. It's just physically impossible. You can't throw a baseball anymore.
Yeah. Well, okay. So business owners looking for a strategist, right? They need to work with you throughout the year to make sure that they deduct everything legally, but also correctly, and they don't make a mistake like this.
And efficiently too. Like in that example, like, yeah, you can deduct a G-Wagon, but you might be like, wow, like there might be better things, like maybe going out and buying a rental property. You know, like that's going to be a way better tax deduction, and it's going to make you money. Buying a G-Wagon, that just costs you money.
Yeah. So business owners that want to work with a strategist, how do they work with you, and how do they find you, contact you? What do they need to do?
First you want to hit the subscribe button, the red one somewhere on the screen, and then you also just want to click the link in the video. It's going to be somewhere around here, and I'm sure there's going to be one in the description as well. To apply for a call to work with me and my team. You'll go through the questionnaire, and then we'll get you on the schedule, and then we're going to give you real advice. You know, like we'll tell you like, hey, we think this makes sense. We don't think it makes sense, because if we're not a good fit, we're not going to just try to like get money out of you. We want to make sure that you leave talking with us better than when you started.
Awesome. JT Pells, the tax quarterback. Much appreciated.
Thank you.